What's up, guys? Welcome to episode 7 of the PJF podcast. We got a very special guest today, Corey Schlesinger, strength coach for Stanford basketball and golf. We had such a good conversation. I was genuinely so amazed, and I learned so much from this episode. We talked about microdosing, so it's kind of like how to split up your training days. We talked about megadosing, so this is kind of how he puts his Stanford basketball players through their workouts throughout the year. We talked about flexibility. We talked about how to gain mobility the right way. We talked about so many different things, from nutrition to recovery to advice for future strength coaches. I can't even begin to get into all of the different topics that we covered. You're going to want to watch this entire episode. Definitely don't skip through and just watch random parts. Let's do it. You're listening to the PJF Podcast, a show dedicated to decoding elite sports performance and fitness. I'm Paul Fabritz, and I'm an MBA strength and conditioning and performance trainer. If you want to become superhuman, take your fitness, and take your sports performance to the next level, this is the podcast for you. Let's do it. If you guys don't know who Corey is, man, you got to check him out on social media. A lot of top strength coaches, top trainers are already learning from him. I've been learning from him for several years on social media. He is the Stanford men's basketball and golf strength and conditioning coach. Dude is a total badass. He's got the second best beard I've ever been around, so I guess that's a compliment.
I'm assuming Zeus is the first.
You're almost on James Harden's level. Not quite, though.
Respect.
Yours has the hypertrophy. It's been through a good strength phase.
Right. That's 100% accurate.
Yeah. So we got some work to do, but we'll get there.
It's okay.
We'll get there. I'm very judgy with beards. I actually can't grow one at all, so I just judge other people's.
Well, it's okay. If you can grow it up top, that's all that really matters.
Right. So we're going to get into a lot of good stuff today. Definitely want to pick Corey's brain because what he does is so different from what I do in the independent side, and a lot of what we talk about is what goes on in the independent side, but I want to get some insight into how it actually works with team strength and conditioning. So Corey's known for microdosing, right? Microdosing.
Yes, sir.
And they basically train 6 days a week.
Yep.
So the whole idea that you got to rest 48 to 72 hours or whatever, that is very dose dependent. So if you kill yourself and you do like 15 exercises for your chest, then yeah, you might have to rest 72 hours. But if you're microdosing like how Corey does it, you're just getting in, you're getting out, you're getting a good 20 to 30 minute session. And it seems to be very effective. Can you kind of take us through your thought process on microdosing?
Yeah, essentially it started from a really humble place. So when me and Coach first got the job at Stanford, we're sitting down having coffee, and I had to ask him, I was like, there's something that you just got to hate that I do. I mean, you've watched me train guys for 3 years. Like, there's got to be something that just annoys you. And he's like, warm-ups. Nothing ticks me off more than watching you do warm-ups, because I know you're pulling teeth out there. The guys don't want to be out there doing that 10 to 15 minute warm-up before every practice. Yeah. You try to make it cool. You're trying to do all these different things, stations, whatever you want to do. I was like, Coach, man, I hate doing that every single day. And I know the guys hate it more than both of us.
Yep.
So how can we make that better? And opposed to bringing the guys in twice a day, well, let's just bring them in once. Give me another 10 to 15 minutes, and we'll call it a strength warm-up. Mm. That's essentially what it was. It's like, look, let's just go these micro dosages throughout the week, and I can have a higher training frequency with a low-age trained athlete, so I can teach them from a motor learning perspective how to train. I mean, if you have that much exposure in one season, that's the same amount of training frequency that an athlete would go through in 4 years of college. So if you're doing very simple movements, you're getting really good at them, you're going to get pretty strong pretty fast.
Yeah.
And the thing is that's the most important to understand is, look, it's the microdosing aspect. And you were taking a freshman through this, it could be like assisted squatting, right? You were taking a senior through it, we might be getting some real load on that thing.
Right.
But what's really interesting is how we spread it out throughout the week. So, for instance, if we take a typical conference schedule, we play every Thursday and Saturday. So typically people think, okay, well, you got to have one hard practice day, and you're going to have 2 game days. So from that perspective, you just kind of fill in the blanks.
Mm-hmm.
So on our heavy practice day, well, you best believe we're going to do our heaviest weight training session. And a lot of people automatically cause pause there, right? Because they're like, well, what do you mean you're doing heavy weights before you do heavy practice? Well, if you look at stress holistically, absolutely.
Exactly.
Because we want to have those high days.
And then get that recovery day.
Exactly. Because those recovery days, it's going to be light on the court, Corey. Oh, let's go squat in the weight room. Well, now stress is now high.
High every day.
So we're high every day. So everybody's going to get messed up. We can't compartmentalize stress. Once people start doing that, weight room and everything, you break up with your girlfriend, you got in a car accident, like it's all stress, right? So the less we can compartmentalize it and see it from a big picture perspective, then we can start waiving stresses and then hopefully elicit quote unquote adaptations. Mm-hmm. So with that heavy practice day, it's probably going to be on a Tuesday. And that's probably going to be heavy squatting, heavy deadlifting, like more of your grindy stuff. The furthest, or that which would be the furthest away from game days typically. And then on game days, it's very elastic and reactive, right? Mm-hmm. It could be snatches, could be jerks, could be even med ball throws. And then the days that are in between, you just fill in the spaces with speed, strength, and shrink speed. Yep. So it could be your clean variations. It could be heavier barbell squat jumps, kettlebell swings. And then you just fit in your accessory work when you can.
I love that. And so are you looking at one main movement per day, or is it two?
Perfect. Yes. It's only one. Just get awesome at one movement a day.
Okay.
Because if someone told you, like any general fitness enthusiast or anybody, like, heck, you can take this even in the basketball space. If you're only to work on one thing, they said, look, all you're doing is jump shots today, or all you're doing is squatting today, you're probably going to go ham on it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because that's the only thing you got. Oh, and
right.
you also got only 30 minutes.
Yeah.
So intensity is going to get up pretty quick.
That's huge.
And so with that being said, you wonder why you can recover fast, right? You go tap that intensity, and maybe that's just the most minimal effective dosage, because that's what we're trying to achieve, especially in season. The last thing I want to do is conflict with stress.
Yeah.
I just want to complement it. And so if we look at it from like a quote unquote potentiation standpoint, well, that's my goal, right? I'm trying to get these guys ready for practice, ready for games. So I'm not trying to conflict with that by any means. So that's where, like you can turn it up and tone it down. And the best part, the days the guys come in and they're not feeling it, get out.
Yeah.
Guess what? You just missed 15% of your training for the week? But
right. Whereas if you were 3 days a week and you miss a day, that's huge.
That's huge. That's 33%.
Yeah.
So then what? Right? And then you have a couple of those. So if you look at it from your annual season or your season length, man, that's a lot of training missed. But here, these are opportunities to get strong too. I mean, you've been in those days where you walk in, it's like, man, I'm not really feeling it. Next thing you know, oh man, I'm feeling good, PR day.
Yeah.
I don't want to miss those opportunities to get awesome because they are so far and few between. So now we have more opportunities to express, athleticism or express a certain adaptation that we're trying to achieve. And then more importantly, like some days are just bad. Get out. And now all of a sudden they walk into practice like, man, I didn't have to lift. This is a good day.
Yeah.
And now I just made practice better.
Yep. Okay. I love that. And then so you got your main lift, and the reason I love that so much is because basketball players are masters at figuring out how hard to go to get through. So if they go, oh, I got an hour and I got 10 exercises, cool, I'm going to go half-ass on all of these, and then I'm going to go hard on maybe a couple sets. But now it's like, I got to leave it all in here. I only get these 4 sets or whatever.
That is such a good way of looking at it.
And so you got that main meat and potatoes lift, and is this just like a lower body and an upper body, or just a lower body?
I look at all movements as global. It could be a squat, but I mean, if you put a bar on your back, that's
everything.
Global.
Yeah.
Trap bar deadlift, that's global.
Right.
A bench press, if you do it right, is global. But essentially, like how we break it down so that we get all that accessory work in is when they walk in, we're not doing some 5 to 10 minute warm up. Like here we go with these calisthenics that might do nothing, right? So our A series, if you will, it's basically 4 to 5 exercises. It's almost like a circuit-like fashion, but it's all like human movements, if you will, like no-handed get-ups, chin, climbing. Like that's one thing I like a lot is just being able to get up on the pull-up bars and just go from left to right, or like monkey bars like you do as a child. And then some isolated movements like partner hamstring curls or Nordic curls, if you will. Anything like that will actually help me prepare for the major movement of the day.
Yeah, that's rare And that falls in line with my philosophy as well. I do a lot of isolated stuff before I get going. And traditionally, probably how we are taught in the textbooks is always put the isolated stuff after. And sometimes that has its place if you're going to completely annihilate a muscle, right? With the isolated stuff. But if you're just activating, I think it makes a lot of sense. And then for basketball players, the limiting factor is the knee. And so why would we not want to pump up the quads a little bit or pump up the hamstrings and get some blood flowing, get some synovial fluid going before you get into that main squat or deadlift or whatever?
Well, ideally too, these long levered athletes, I mean, when you do something as global as like a barbell back squat or a front squat, the last thing you want to do with these long levered athletes is let them just rely on what they're strong at to get the job done. Mm-hmm. So it's a great opportunity to hit those weaknesses that you know are weaknesses. I mean, they play basketball, so what are they lacking? Glutes and hams. Like it's always going to be glutes and hams with that athlete because they never hit flight phase, right? They never actually hit to that point, and they decelerate so much. So they rely on those quads more than you never believe. So you wonder why patellar tendonitis comes up. Well, let's hit the opposite. Just flip the other end of the spectrum. So actually, to be honest with you, I got a lot of that from a bodybuilder named John Meadows back in the day. Mountain dog training, I know it's kind of crazy, but dude's amazing. But when in one of my programs when I was young, he would put 4 sets of 25 to 30 on prone ham curls before squatting. I was like, why would you do that? Like, that makes no sense. But my squat felt amazing. And I was like, oh, I see what you're trying to achieve now.
Yep.
And that's where you hit, like, and that's what's cool about being at Stanford. I only have 13 athletes. I'm in a team setting, but I could have 13 individual A series based off their limiting factors going into their prescribed lift or their major movement of the day.
Okay. So you have this A series, you get into the meat and potatoes, and then afterwards they're into practice?
So right in between, we actually do our B series, which is our complex. Complex is life. Complex is A, warm-up, B, training, and C, readiness testing for me. So a simple complex for listeners that are not familiar, let's take a barbell, for example. You're going to do about 3 to even 6 different movements. It's like a circuit-like fashion with the bar in your hand. So for instance, a very popular one we do is we'll go 3 RDLs, 3 muscle cleans, 3 front squats, 3 presses, 5 rows.
Nice.
Right? So
you basically don't take your hands off the bar?
You keep your hands on the bar the entire time. Most of the guys have 10 kilos on each side, so a total of 40 kilos. And once again, this is the most important aspect to me because think about everything we just did there. We did everything that you would do in a weight room anyways. You do a hip extension, a hip flexion, a triple extension, a press, and a pull, right? If you did that every day in microdosing, now you just taught from a motor learning perspective. They know how to train. Yeah. They're doing it at such submaximal levels that from like just learning how to move properly, I mean, like these guys come in with no training age. So now I'm teaching them how to train. And then all you do is add small little iterations. Okay, maybe we're going to do a kettlebell complex or a dumbbell complex, or now we're going to do a snatch grip complex, right? So now they're doing snatch grip RDLs and a muscle snatch. So, but if I'm watching that every single day, I see their movement profile. And what's really, really cool is all of a sudden you're starting to watch them hit those complexes and they keep re-gripping the bar, or that bar path ain't the same. And that's when you know, fatigue. Like you see that central nervous fatigue. I'm not going to pick that up with just that, hey, hello, what's up, man? Yeah. You're actually putting, brass tacks in. Like you're seeing how they move with load, and it's consistent. It's the same thing every time they come in. So when you see that over a period of time, that's when you can cut out the microdosing. But hey, you know what? Today was a good day. You got enough in. Just go hit the weight room or go hit the practice court. So essentially we go through our A series, a lot of isolated movements to get you prepared for the C, which is the movement of the day. Complex, readiness, extended warm-up, if you will, which should really complement the movement of the day. And then we'll go into cleans, back squat, front squat. Once again, it depends on the individual. And then as soon as they're done with that, they go get taped, they get replenished, and then they're with their individual coach or their skills coach doing whatever they need to do with about 20 to 30 minutes left before we start our team practice. Yeah. So how smooth is that, right?
That's awesome.
And they don't have to come
gradually, they're getting more warm, they're getting more activated. Yes. By the time they're into practice, they're good to go, performing at probably their best. And the best Whereas like the warm-up doesn't really prepare you at that level. Like we might warm up the body and stretch out the muscles, but every hooper knows, and that's the problem, is a lot of people haven't played basketball. Nothing wrong with that.
Mm-hmm.
But they don't quite understand the difference of feeling at an all-time high compared to just feeling the normal dynamic warm-up.
Right.
Like your best dunks come halfway through open gym
Oh,
when you're
big facts.
drenched in sweat.
Yes.
It's not like after this little 15-minute dynamic warm-up.
Right. That's the same way in weightlifting.
Yeah.
Right? I've never seen somebody hit their power exercise after their warm-ups and they're actually achieving right weights unless they spent 45 minutes on that one exercise.
Yep.
That's why if you go to a weightlifting hall, I mean, it's unbelievable to watch their quote-unquote warm-ups, and then they'll actually hit their sets like 30 to 45 minutes into that workout.
Mm-hmm.
Take the same thing in any other sport, in any other skill set. Like and that's where you see, like, talking about big-time dunks, that's why you see the guys at the end of open gyms that never dunked before get their first dunk.
Yeah.
It's never in the beginning of open gym. It's always after
they're
those.
completely drenched.
Yep.
Yeah. Going back to that B series, looking at the complex. So I love that idea. I think where people go wrong, or at least what I see, is people try to get creative and they put together the wrong exercises in that complex. So they'll do something like, a tricep overhead extension, then into a barbell back squat. It's like, yeah, that's a complex, but like you shouldn't be squatting the same weight that you're doing a tricep extension with.
I think they complexed complex, which I don't know how you can do that.
Right.
They figured it out.
Could you give us just one example? If you're listening to this and you're going to LA Fitness right now, what's a simple complex you could do?
I think if you're going to LA Fitness, number one, you probably don't need to be with a barbell because someone's doing curls in the squat rack, so just get out of there.
True.
But one of my favorites is using kettlebells. They're so versatile, and I think any population can use them, all the way from Olympic level athletes to gen pop. So a simple complex that I personally like is taking anywhere between a 28 to 32 kilo kettlebell, and you hit 5 RDLs, 10 swings, 5 goblet squats, and then we'll go 10 what we call horn rows. So you grab it by the horns opposed to grabbing it by the handle.
Yeah.
The good thing about that weight and long-levered athletes is they can manipulate it around their center of mass a lot better than a barbell.
Yep.
And so when you got longer levers, obviously you want simplicity.
Absolutely.
And so, gen pop, you can probably get a barbell in your hand pretty quick, but well, maybe not so much, but you know what I'm saying, as far as the anthros are concerned.
Mm-hmm.
But with those type of complexes, look, your limiting factor is going to be your limiting lift. For instance, if you're doing an overhead press, well, your complex is probably going to be like no more than like 20 to 30 kilos because you're going to be limited by that overhead press. Now, if you want to get cute and creative, and this is what I do, especially when we get from January, February, March into our conference play, and that's when we're cutting half of practice out, and that's when we're really chasing strength and chasing like speed, strength, and strength speed, is I cut out the limiting factor lift. So let's get rid of the press. Well, because I got rid of that press, now I can add a lot more load for those RDLs, those muscle cleans, those front squats, and those rows compared to what that. And then even more so, let's cut out the rows. Now it's just RDLs, cleans, front squat. Okay, I just want to get awesome at cleans today. Okay, how about this? You're going to hit 3 cleans, 2 front squats. I mean, at that point, you got some pretty decent load in your hands, and then you just roll right into cleans or squats. Mm-hmm. So now you're already getting to those weights faster. So just use complex as general, and then once you're trying to achieve some real responses, that's when you start cutting out the limiting factor lifts. Right. And just build them in somewhere else.
Yep. I love that. So if your Tuesday is your high intensity, you're talking about your heavy day, and then your Wednesday, let's say we don't have a game on Wednesday, you would get into a higher speed, right?
I like it. Well, it depends on the guy, right? One thing that I really like that I found is bench press. And I got that from like 100-meter sprinters. Because what they would do, like anywhere between 24 hours before their event, is they would go heavy upper, like 1 rep max upper. Mm-hmm. But that's still going to have a global response on the nervous system. Yeah, for the nervous system. And I was like, that's pretty smooth. And then I would go on our first game day, like our Thursday would be more like speed, strength, speed. Like it would be like a clean.
This is on game day?
On game day.
Okay.
On game day.
Yeah.
And then that second one, so then we have that Friday, which is more of a regen day. And then that Saturday would be more like snatches. So definitely on the speed, strength, almost absolute velocity spectrum. Yep. So essentially what we're doing is we're riding the force velocity curve all the way down. So we go from max effort all the way to absolute velocity.
That's a good way to think about it.
Yeah.
Okay. I like that a lot. Now, do you get any pushback from people saying, I'm not getting enough metabolic damage. I know they're not using that term.
Nope.
Well, they are Stanford. I don't know. These are some smart kids.
Man, I do
But that feeling of like not quite getting that pump that they're used to getting, especially any of them that grew up in strength and conditioning in high school, they're probably used to pump sessions.
Right.
So do you get any pushback on that?
Nah, that's what Fridays are about.
Oh, Fridays are
so
the pump
Fridays,
days.
right in between those 2 game days, high volume, with more elementary movements. And what it turns into is basically a bodybuilding
It's a
circuit.
bodybuilding session.
That's all it is. And what is that? That's restorative, right? As long as you dose it properly. Like, it's almost like a 1x20 method, but not that much volume. It's more like 1x15. And then it turns into 2x15 and then 3x15.
Yeah.
And then once again, you just dose it out to where they can handle the accumulation.
Right.
And the next thing you know, guys are feeling really good about themselves because they look good in that jersey.
That matters.
It matters. It's
matter.
tank top season year round.
Right.
You know?
Right. Yep. And so outside of that, you're basically staying away from isolation stuff for the upper body. You're getting your triceps through your push. You're getting your biceps through your pull-ups or your row.
Well, essentially, some of the guys, I mean, it is that important to them.
Yeah.
And look, I'm in a limited role, especially in NCAA, as far as the amount of hours that I can spend with kids. But there is volunteer sessions, right? And so what you generally see is we'll go through our microdosing session, say they squatted that day. Then they go into practice, and then they kind of come in after practice, and they're grabbing their shakes, and they kind of look over at those dumbbells. So then they start sneaking in some curls and tricep extensions. And you know what? I feed into that. So we just call it, the arm forearm or the gain train, whatever you want to call it, right? Yeah. So I always have that up on the board just in case they walk by and like, I got some reserves for that.
Yeah.
So, it's kind of hard to walk through my room and not want to do that when you got 2 or 3 other dudes, shirts off, feeling good about themselves. And I got a little bit left. So it's almost like that one more mentality.
Right.
But once again, it's the kind of culture you try to create.
For sure. For sure. How long do you get with a kid per week?
So off season. So this is what's been really interesting. I'm really glad you asked that question. So when I first started in strength in the off season, which is, the time to get guys bigger, faster, stronger, right? It used to be all 8 hours, and then sports staff couldn't touch them. Then it shifted to 6 hours, and sport coaches get 2 hours. And then for the past few years, it's been 4 and 4.
Really?
Yeah. So in an off season,
this is news to me. Yeah, that's not good.
That is
because they're growing up with more basketball and less general development, and they're not playing sports. And now they're getting to college and they're going the opposite direction.
Yeah.
Wow.
So luckily I have a great staff and they give me a couple more hours. So I at least get like 5, 5.5, 6. You know? So because they understand the value in it.
Yeah.
But it's getting to that point. They even tried to pass last year. All 8 hours are dedicated by the coaching staff, and they can just dictate how much strength they want to do in it. And it luckily did not pass. But
that's not good.
It's coming down the pipeline. It's going to pass. So it's going to get really interesting.
That is crazy. So, and then in season, how often? How much you get?
In season, so we're dividing into 20 hours. So for me, it's like, okay, if I'm doing anywhere between 20 to 30 minute microdosing sessions each day, that can rank anywhere between 2 to 3 hours.
Okay.
Yeah. So I could bring them in for like 2 1.5 hour sessions, something like that. Or 3
So do you think
sessions.
the standard for most other big programs would be like 3 days a week?
Yeah.
3 days a week, get them in for an hour?
I would say if they were doing it right, yes. But what you generally see is like 1 to 2, and then there's like weeks that go in between. Like it gets sketched quick because, especially non-conference schedule with all the traveling in between. Yeah. Then it turns into like you're going to try to sneak in some hotel sessions. And then the problem is once you get to more of like a controlled schedule, then it's like, oh, well, it's time to get awesome again. And then you got very conflicted stress. Like you created because you don't have that foundation. Yeah. Or you don't have that consistency in your training.
Right. And then you want to hop back in at that same point. Yep. That's where the overuse injuries come in. And
bingo.
Interesting. Wow. That is news to me. I didn't know that you guys only had 3 hours.
Or in season we can sneak it up to 4, but it just depends on how it works, right? Yeah. Especially with travel. Travel's a tough one. But yeah, that's where it gets interesting, especially in college.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. I know I've heard you say before you're monitoring on force plates and your guys are staying the same or going up late in season. That's huge.
Huge.
March, if your guys are the same, that's a win. If they've gone up, that's a huge win.
Right.
the majority, I would say, and I've talked about this on the podcast, the majority of pre-draft guys that I get, I'm talking one and done guys, I look at their high school highlights and they jump really high. And then after 1 year of college, they don't jump as high. What is happening? Is this a load thing, or is this just push strength and do nothing else thing?
I think it's a huge combination. And here's the biggest culprit is, as strength coaches, we think, okay, to validate our position, we must get guys stronger. But I think we take getting strong into a context that has to be globally understood. For instance, everybody knows what a back squat is, or everybody knows what a bench press is. So my staff knows what that is. I'm going to push the numbers on that. Mm-hmm. And so now you're just working this, above 80% range all the time. And then you're wondering why you're teaching guys how to break more than you're teaching them how to flow in and out, right? Mm-hmm. So like the guys that can flow into eccentric amortization than concentric, those are the guys that are probably going to be better athletes. Yes. But when you're just teaching breaking, the global response to that, you wonder why guys don't want to back squat on back squat days. Yeah. There's a reason. There's like this deep innate, this is not the right stress for my body. Yes. And they're not wrong. Yeah. And so when you think do we really need to be chasing these max effort strength numbers? I used to think so. And then all of a sudden I got force plates. Right. And then I did the same thing with the Olympic lifts. Man, cleans went up. I bet jumps went up. Nope. Yeah. Back squats went up. Jumps went up. Nope. Mm-hmm. And I kept getting L's. And I'm like, why am I getting L's? Like everybody's told me back squat 2.5 times body weight or whatever. Yes. And you're going to get this. Nope.
This is our entire episode 2 podcast. A lot of it was about this. Yeah. And when you talk about this stuff, you're going to get a lot of haters from the strength coaches who just think stronger is better. And that's kind of what we learned. Like in college, myself and my classmates, we didn't question this stuff. It's just hey, man, if you get stronger, you produce more force. If you produce more force, you jump higher. Right. But it's I got stronger in a back squat that took me 4 seconds on the concentric. Right. Did that translate to a 0.2 second jump?
No, not one bit. And I get the resiliency and durability aspect, and I appreciate that. Right. But that is a small percentage of the training that they can handle. Mm-hmm. It's all about what's in their cup. I forgot who I was talking about this with, but if you look at, for instance, the coffee cup we're holding right now, and this is their entire stress, you go to max effort, I don't care what the kid's got for the rest of the week, max effort to a kid with that low training age, with those type of anthros, is going to dump your cup pretty quick. And then, let's add basketball on top of that. Let's add school stress. Right. Let's add all this. But if you work strength speed and you work sub-max work, a lot of sub-max work, because if you look at strength, true strength, it's a skill. Yeah. These powerlifters, it's not they just got strong. No, they've dialed in this skill to handle these loads at each centimeter on the way down. Yep. It is a true skill. That's what we're trying to teach our athletes, right? Is to be better athletes in skill within what they can do. Yep. So we got to meet them where they're at, not just try to throw them in the deep end when all their body is literally physically seeing don't do this to me, but yet we're rah, 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 let's go, big weights. But you can physically see it in their face. They're probably not the right stress.
Yeah, yeah. No, exactly. It's so rare for strength coaches to fully understand that. Because like I said, we've all just been taught to go, more strength. And if more strength was the answer, the adaptations at the muscular and the tendon level would be the same as jumping and running. But actually, they're quite opposite. So not that it's bad, and like you said, for injury prevention, those adaptations increase stiffness for the tendons, and whatever the adaptation is at the muscular level, that could be a good thing for injury prevention, but at some point it goes against what we're trying to get with jumping and running and cutting, right? There's a lot of things like increase hypertrophy, increase internal moment arm length, decrease contraction velocity. So better for slow force, decrease contraction velocity. Right. So it's if we keep pushing in that direction, we're probably going to have some issues at some point.
Yeah, you have to.
Yeah. And then I think the big thing is coaches and it's players understanding where they are on that spectrum. So it's hey, do I need a little bit more strength for injury prevention? Do I need a little bit more strength to be able to drive through the lane and take off with contact? Do you find generally, if we're just looking at percentages, do you find generally when you get freshmen, the goal is hey, we just need some muscle, we need some strength? Or do you feel they're kind of where they need to be and then you can get into other stuff?
Oh man, that's a tough
Which I
one.
know it's always different, but if
Right.
you're looking at, hey, majority of the time, this is what we're looking at.
I would say this: if there wasn't the aesthetics aspect to it and the sport coaches that are like, my guys better look physically better when they
Yeah.
come in,
Yeah.
or at the end of this summer session, because I'd probably do things a little bit different. But there's some other things too. Like, look, if a kid's in your weight room and you want them to feel like they're getting stronger, they need to see it physically too. Like, so
Yeah.
there's some confidence things that
True.
I'm like 100%.
True.
Let's hit some arms, like whatever.
Right.
I don't care. But as far as like, I think you got to meet everybody where they're at.
Yeah.
And, a great example is I always train my guys in 3 groups when they come in, or in the summer. So I have my upperclassmen group who are split off into 2, and then strictly my freshmen in one group. I can't have them mixed in. But it's a self-graduating system. So I've had a kid in week 1 as a freshman jump to the upper class group like that because he came in ready to go.
Yeah.
But it's where you got to meet the kids where they're at. Some of these kids, jumping jacks, here we go, right? TRX assisted squats with tempos, here we go. Like ISO lunges,
Yep.
That's where we got to go, because once again, no matter where they're at, you complement where they're at. Now, if they're not playing basketball, conflict all you want. Like, yeah, wake up sore, like can't get out of bed. Yeah, sure, why not? Like, I mean, probably not, but you can go chase those type of stresses and hope for those responses and adaptation. But for me, I'm just like, dude, they got to play basketball 4 hours out of the week. Some of these freshmen, when they come in, there's also a foreign tour that they might be on. So now they got, I think 5 to 10 practices, something like that. So they got full practices on top of those 4 hours that they're allotted. I mean, they're already in college basketball. Like, it ain't, here we go, AAU, and then high school, we get to rest a little bit, and then boom, you're right into full-blown practices with more men than they've ever been around.
Yep.
So if you look at it from a tactical periodization perspective, they're going to acute real quick. And you wonder why freshmen generally have the highest amount of stress fractures, especially in preseason, because they're not used to that kind of load.
Yeah.
So if you did tactical periodization properly, you might not need the weight room year 1. Actually, at all, if you really
What do
get
you
it
mean
right.
by tactical periodization?
Oh, great question. So if you look at like international rugby, Premier League soccer, what they do is they basically create these constraints. So like, let's take, for instance, tackling in international rugby. Well, if you watch what they do, like when they're doing tackling with dummies or they're tackling with each other, I mean, that's force, and they sets, reps, tempos, like they do everything all within, just like we would do in a weight room. The only thing is it's just calisthenics and with their own body weight.
Yeah.
So if you did the same thing in basketball, imagine what you could create.
For
You could
sure.
create the right stresses that are quote unquote sport specific. Let's be careful there. But you will put the right stresses to meet the demands that are going to be there. So that's where, there's a few out there doing it, but we got to get closer and closer to developing some of these models, not just here's X drill I did back in the 70s, or here's drill that I think works on closing out, or what is that actual physio load? Like, what is that actually going to do from a stress response adaptation? And so what you do is you create these environmental constraints that will allow those things to happen. Or it's like, for instance, if I put a lot of weight on the bar, I'm probably going to get strong. Same ideology. You just take that into a tactical session or technical session. So,
Okay.
Yeah. So,
Right.
but if you did that right, maybe year 1, they don't need a lot of strength training because that's still too conflicting. But if you just get year 1, I could probably get a lot done with a pull-up bar, with a dip bar, and a kettlebell.
Yes.
I could get a whole lot done.
For sure. So when you're talking about conflicting, there's a lot of different systems to look at. Like, our nervous system is conflicting. To me, the limiting factor is going to be the knees, right? Because if we get them in the weight room and we're squatting heavy and then they're on the court and they're pounding, as strength coaches, we separate these things. We're good at compartmentalizing, and we go, oh, that's forces through squats, but then that's forces through plyos, and then that's forces on the court. And the knee's like, dude, I don't care what your little compartmentalized system is. Like, I just know stress. I just know compression. So that's one of the things that I think when you talk about competing, and especially those younger athletes who don't have a big training age, I think they can really break down early, and I know that a lot of college freshmen start to break down, whether it's patellar tendonitis or worse, knee injuries. How do you deal with training the knee? How do you deal with training around pain? What are your thoughts on training the knee in general?
So essentially, I hate this analogy, but it's so true. Like, you're only as strong as your weakest link, right? And like we were discussing earlier, this is an XL-decel sport that is on technically a very small playing surface, right? If you look at it from, like, if you compare it to soccer, soccer, you don't hear much knee pain. Why? Because it's always glutes or it's always hamstrings, right? Because of the amount of space they have. So now they can actually get into quote unquote flight phase.
Yep.
If basketball experienced that just a little bit, I don't think you'd have as many knee issues. The issue is a lack of development on the posterior chain. And so you wonder, and then on top of all of this, shoes that they're wearing, right? The court surface that they're playing on, and they're taped and braced year round. So now, like that, you add that, like, don't even worry about training legs. Like, let's just talk about the environmental factors that are automatically going to place that stress on the knees.
Yep.
I think one of the best things most sport staffs could do, and I think this would be dope, if you put kids in chucks and have them do individuals on the concrete.
Yeah.
I think it'd be the best thing in the world, because they're going to load properly, because they know what pain is, and they're going to find a way to get out of pain.
Right.
And all of a sudden, those biomechanics clean up really, really quick.
Yeah.
And you wonder why, So,
well, we deal with more support than ever, more ankle bracing, more taping, high top shoes, and the ankle injury risk doesn't go down as the years go on. So it's like, are we going in the right direction?
No.
I went out to, I go to the Philippines and I do clinics out there, and in the Philippines, everybody hoops. So you'll be driving to dinner or whatever, and just people on the side of the road will be hooping.
That's dope. I
Dude,
didn't know that.
It's so sick. And so they'll put like a rim up on a tree, like they don't have the resources or anything. So it won't be a real basketball court, but they'll be running 5-on-5. And like I would go stop by and just watch some of the games. So we'd pull over and just like hang out. I'd teach them some drills, whatever. Yeah. But I'm sitting there watching their games, and most of them are playing barefoot on dirt. And it's uneven, like a surface that I would never play on. I'm like, oh, I don't have that kind of training. I do proprioception, but I can't go to a crossover on an uneven surface like that. And some of them are in sandals, homemade shoes, because they don't have the resources. And I'm going around asking the coaches, like, do you guys see a lot of foot problems, ankle problems? Or like, we've never seen an ankle sprain. They're like, we don't deal with that at all.
Right, and that just tells you everything you need to know. It's environmental factors that are creating this. Yep. And so, like, let's take a step back then. It's not necessarily about adding a new modality to make this better. Like, oh, let's get rid of your symptoms via like ice and stem and whatever else you want to use. Like, no, let's actually, like, instead of putting a Band-Aid on a bullet wound, like, let's go back and let's change the environment. And that's the very first thing I do with these kids when I first get them. Like, it's not even the weight room. We go in the wrestling room. And that's where we're just doing, like, all right, this is how you fall. This is how you get up off the ground. Yeah. And then let's crawl a little bit, because, man, with your anthros, like, I want to ask you to push bars above your head and away from you, like horizontally. Can you even crawl? Like, can you even do a simple bear crawl before you can even do a push-up? Like, I don't even want to push up yet. Yeah. Because that's going to get conflicted really quick.
Man, I love that. That actually... It just reminded me, because my fiance watches entire basketball games just to watch them fall and not get up. She thinks it's hilarious when they fall and they sit there, like, they'll go through 2 plays and they'll like sit there waiting for somebody to help them up. It's like, you can't just stand.
Well, what's so interesting with that is, like, people are starting to get smart now. Have you seen at the NBA games, they have these like little booster seats now?
No. So on the bench?
Yeah. So certain guys have that, and that's smart, because like, that actually makes sense for them to be able to rest properly. When they're sitting down, I mean, once again, let's think about Western society. Was it made for people that have anthros of 6'8"? No, right?
Not at
like,
all.
The car you whip. No, man, 6'8" dude's probably not that comfortable in there.
Yeah,
right?
well, I mean, I had Taco Fall in the Tesla the other day.
Oh my God, that poor kid.
True 7'7".
Did you please tell me he's riding in the back seat and you got the front seat taken out?
He sits in the front seat. He scoots it all the way back, and then he just like sits in like this fetal position.
You wonder.
But my thing was, like, it was impressive that he fit in, but I'm also like, wow, you're so skilled at doing that, which shows me that you do this often, right? You're getting in these Ubers and like you've developed this skill. That's probably not very good for posture long term.
Exactly, man. That's where you got to get them out of Western society for a second, and let's get them back to, not necessarily from a DNS standpoint, but like, let's go through childhood development again. Yeah. Let's see where you missed along these lines. And man, even like from Jump Street, raising your head off the mat, it's like, oh gosh, like the strategies you use. So literally our first test is everybody sits on their butt. and I have them stand up 50 times. Stand up, sit down. I don't give them any cues. Stand up, sit down, stand up, sit down. And all I'm doing is observing their loading strategies. And then all of a sudden, like, they get under fatigue. And then you start seeing the true strategy. And that's the one that's the go-to. Right hand down, internal rotation on the opposite side, stand up. And then you're like, yeah, there's probably going to be some problems there. And then you take something away. All right, you got 50 done. Great job. Now don't use your hands.
Oh, wow.
That's when it gets real for everybody.
Yeah, people have probably never stood up without using their hands.
100%. And that's when you're like, okay, well, you wonder why hips suck, right? Because they never have to be in these positions. But your hip is a ball and socket joint. It's got to roll around.
Yeah, probably. I'm imagining, I don't know how I would stand up, it's kind of weird to think about. But yeah. I think as you get up, you'd probably go through a lot of like internal, external rotation that the hip doesn't normally go through, right? In sports.
It's like a 90-90 shin box, right? That's
Yeah.
So if you did a 90-90 shin box, okay, that's great. Now you pop up on one knee, and then now you're lunging.
And then you half kneel, stand up. Okay.
Exactly.
Right.
But what's interesting is...
Can anybody like not figure that out?
Oh,
have you ever had that?
Oh, 100%. Well, they just start like... That's when you start... They'll start on their back and then just kind of like roll themselves up. Like they'll just use all this momentum to pop themselves on their feet. And I'm like, okay, well, that looked great.
Yeah.
Now you got 49.
Yeah, that'll work for like 9.
Right. So what's really interesting is that's when you start seeing, well, if I put a barbell on his back, what's going to happen?
Right.
Risk versus reward's not there. Let's add all this compression to you because, that's just stupid, right? So what I'm trying to do is squeeze the juice out of every joint from a movements perspective. And then, okay, if I can give you some more degrees of freedom, then, man, you got stronger. Like, let's do the least amount of strength work to get the most amount of strength work.
Yeah.
Because if you don't have the internal and external hip rotation to be able to get into a squat, okay, well, there's going to be blockage all the way up the chain. So instead of that force that goes throughout your entire chain being dispersed evenly, now you're going to have super localized areas that are taking a brunt of that stress.
Yep.
So if you look at it like, let's say, imagine a snake for a second. Imagine a snake with a bunch of crooks in it going up, right? It's ping-ponging back and forth from the head to the tail. That's probably not an efficient slithering snake, is it?
Yeah.
But if he was just himself, right, that's how they move. Super slithery. And now that force dissipates in a nice rhythmic fashion that gets them from point A to point B. Yeah. So that's how I try to imagine this. Like, the more analogies I can create,
for sure,
hopefully it starts like reconciling with,
dude,
oh man,
I'm all in on analogies.
Heck
People
yeah.
get annoyed. Like, I give so many analogies.
Well, it's a story.
But they remember the brain. Yeah, the brain needs reference points. So then instead of thinking like, oh, I need this kinetic fluidity, they're just like, oh, like a snake. Cool.
Exactly.
I can do that.
I didn't even have to say kinetic.
I love that. Okay, and so when you're talking about wrestling room movement, what I see is a very good substitution of what most people would go all in on traditional mobility or flexibility. They say, well, we need these things, we need this internal rotation, so I'm just going to sit here in the static stretch. And I don't know if you're aware of this or not, but there is still the myth in basketball that the more flexible we get, specifically through static stretching, the higher we jump and the faster we run. This is still around.
Really?
Yes, this is still around.
Heart.
I know. I thought that we closed the door on that a long time ago, but we didn't. We didn't. Yeah.
That actually really breaks your heart. I mean, if you look at static stretching in general, like, all you're doing is literally telling your body no. Like your body's telling it back to you, like, no, I don't want to be here. But you just keep forcing it. It's like, yes, you might have gained new degrees of freedom temporarily. Can you control those new ranges?
Yes.
And now all you did is just dampen all the GTOs, muscle spindles, all the good stuff.
Yes.
You just basically put earmuffs on and
you're putting them to sleep.
Right.
Yeah. Yes. Why would we want to put those things to sleep?
They're tight for a reason. Like, when people go, oh, my hamstrings are tight, they're trying to create stability because something else is screwed up. So let's look up the chain, let's look down the chain, and let's find the real issue. Because if you can do a parlor trick like PNF and all of a sudden gain new range of motion within 10 seconds, probably not the issue, right? It's definitely a neurological issue. So let's actually find the issue and then roll from there.
Yes. I love that. Yeah, I mean, there's so many studies. Sometimes when there's a debate and it's just like the good strength coaches coming up with like these theories, like this is what sounds right, and you're going back and forth. But when there's so many studies showing that static stretching doesn't work acutely or chronically, right. It's like this should not be a debate anymore. But surprisingly, it is, and there's no correlation between flexibility and vertical jump or sprint speed, and then there's no correlation between flexibility and injury prevention. And actually, there might be on the opposite side, where the more flexible you get, there could actually create some injuries.
For sure.
But I like how you're doing it. You're exposing them. They're going to expand their range of motion, but they're doing it through motor control. They're doing it through strength. Right. So, okay, we gain that extra degree of freedom, but we stabilize that extra degree of freedom at the same time.
Well, how the brain makes decisions, or how the brain makes changes, I should say, is with load. Like all of a sudden, like for instance, do you have an Olympic lifting background?
Personally, I do.
Yeah.
I don't teach it a lot, but I do. Yeah.
With cleans, right? Like you did empty bar sets of cleans. You're like, ew, that's wonky. And then you put 10 kilos on each side, and you're like, oh, okay, that's a little better. And then you put 20 kilos on there. It's like, bang, there it is.
Yeah.
Well, why? Because you had load.
Yeah.
So once the brain gets a little bit of load, it knows how to self-organize. And that's how I look at quote-unquote flexibility and mobility training. That's why I like the principles of FRC a lot. So the functional range and conditioning guys, like it makes sense. You're just putting yourself in a position where you have limited range. Then you work both sides of the joint, isometric, and with all the 40 years of isometric research that backs this simple principle, all of a sudden I have this new degree of freedom because you gave it load.
Right.
That's why PNF technically works, but you're not doing it from a muscle spindle GTO muscle belly. Like you're not getting it from there. You're getting it at the joint. And that's what I'm like, that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to gain flexibility through muscles. Like who wants to make muscles truly longer?
No.
I'm trying to make them short and fast.
Yeah.
Like that's what makes you jump. So the only thing I'm trying to do is give the joint the capacity to go in and out as necessary, and most importantly with smooth and fluidity, because that's when you see people get wrecked. Is when you see those rigid movements that you're like, hey, like they're not going to last.
Yeah.
So that's where it's like those crazy drivers, right? Like you got these people driving on the road and they just whip. Something bad's going to happen.
Right. Just a matter of when.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. As far as like ankle mobility, I know ankle mobility is a huge thing for basketball players. We're all super, super tight in the ankles. Are you kind of looking at that from a global perspective of this is kind of taken care of in your overall movements, or are you isolating this at all?
I do isolate. I mean it in both perspectives, right? Because if I'm training in isolation, well, I want it to eventually go upstairs in my brain, make the connection, oh, this is for squatting, or this is for bending my knee more, right? Because that's 9 times, well, actually, I'm just going to go ahead and say it, 10 times out of 10, the limiting factor.
Yeah.
For instance, one of my quote unquote like global assessments that I do with the guys is I get them as close as I can to the wall, and then I have them with their hands above their head squat.
Facing forward.
Yeah. So, I'm like, all right, guys, squat. And once again, self-limiting exercises, which is my favorite tool for the toolbox, if you will. But it's like, if you break your nose, that's your fault.
Yeah.
Right? Just don't break your nose. And then the first thing you see is like this, not even a quarter squat, it's like a 10 squat. And then they stop. And you're like, that's a problem. And then I go, all right, stand on the balls of your feet. Like, stay on the balls of your feet. Your heels can stay off the ground. And then now squat. And all of a sudden, they squat below parallel.
Yeah.
You're like, all right, so it's your ankle.
Yeah.
Right? There's a lack of dorsiflexion.
Right.
So now let's go work on that. So you can do wall taps. You can do, most of these guys, it's structural. Like they really need some
a lot of it is structural
manual therapy to get that right. So that's where you start making decisions as a strength coach. Okay, what do I need to hit? Because I'm not a physical therapist. I'm not a physio. I'm not going to be the one going in there making manipulations and doing all these things. So what do I got to do? Well, yes, we can do some small level like wall taps, or we can do some things to gain range. A big toe's a big one. Anything you can do to mobilize the big toe.
Yes.
But then you got to think, okay, well, if I'm not getting that range there, I got to go upstairs to get that. And that's why I put such an emphasis on hips. Not because like hips don't lie or anything like that. It's like, no, if I can't get it through my ankles, I got to get it through my hips. Because if I don't get it through my hips and I don't get it through my ankles, the knee.
Yeah.
So exactly. Or low back, right? So that's where you got to work the entire system. And so, yes, you show it through global, right? It's like, like it's a no-brainer there. When those kids see that, they're like, oh, man. That's why we wear weightlifting shoes when we squat.
Yeah. Makes a lot of sense.
Heck
If
yeah.
you can get into better positions and train those positions, why
Heck
not?
Yeah, I'd rather like train the rest of the body opposed to neglecting the rest of the body just because I have one stop or one speed bump along the way.
Yeah.
And then what you generally see though is when you clean that up, all of a sudden they gain new dorsiflexion. And it's not, I don't know if it's necessarily from forcing dorsiflexion with the wall taps or anything like that, or it's just getting generally strong. Because all of a sudden, when you gain strength, especially when you see a lot of hamstring issues, it's not hamstring weakness.
Right.
Or that's not what's called, or excuse me, it's not tightness because of weakness, or it is tightness because of weakness.
Yeah.
All of a sudden you get it strong and it just relaxes. Same thing. Like, hey, let's take our shoes off for a second. Like, I mean, there's more joints in the foot and ankle than there are in the rest of the body.
Yeah.
So if half of those are compromised,
Right.
probably going to be a weak foot, you know? So like, let's walk on some rocks. Like, I know that sounds as novel as that, but let's do some things to have that foot more malleable so that it can actually do its job.
And take your socks off every now and then and let those the sensors in your feet actually wake up, because that's our first line of defense, and that's what's telling us where we are in space.
Yes.
Right? And so we cover it up with these thick-soled shoes and then these super thick socks, and it's like, I like the example of like, it's almost like typing with like gardening gloves on. Like you wouldn't know
that's
where.
Beautiful.
Yeah, there's one
I'm
for you.
stealing that one. Yeah.
Like you wouldn't know how hard to press the keys. You wouldn't know where your hands are.
You seriously, like, that's worth the trip. Like that analogy is worth the trip.
Dude.
Thank you.
I'm big on analogies.
Yes, that was huge.
I'm glad that you like analogies as much as me.
That's a book.
We should have a thing where we send an analogy a day.
Yeah,
I'm going
I
to
like
send you
that.
one analogy a day.
Okay,
All
I'm
right.
in.
All right.
Well,
let's
my
do it.
problem is I don't know if I'm going to be creative enough to
come
compliment
back.
you, but I'm gonna try. I'm gonna try.
Analogy battle. But yeah, I mean, it's just like typing with gardening gloves on, and so then we wonder why athletes don't have awareness of their joints.
Right.
It's like, well, we have no feedback to the brain, and so let's take our shoes off. And I have found, and I don't know if this is just for my athletes, but I have noticed when I started doing more barefoot stuff and getting them out of their shoes more, we actually got a little bit more ankle mobility. I think because we're strengthening up the feet, and when we build stability in the feet, then the ankle can actually do what it wants. Right. So we need stability, mobility.
Exactly.
And if we mess that up at one joint, it's going to affect the joint above or below.
100%, man. If you just, I think you can, this is going to sound really weird. And we talked about max effort strength and boo, boo, boo on that. But it's like, if you give anything in the world strength, eventually it's going to get better.
Yes.
Right. It just depends on the vehicle that you give it. Right. And with the foot and ankle complex, like, look, oh, here's a great one. A video that I saw was a child putting on shoes for the first time. So the child walked, right, barefooted, boom, 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 pretty smooth and coordinated, put shoes on, went to shit quick.
Really?
And you're like, I mean, it's right there. The best example in the world. Someone fresh to walking, they finally got walking down, and then all of a sudden you put the quote-unquote gardening gloves on their hands.
Yeah.
And what happened?
Wow.
And now the rest of our body is trying to figure that thing out. And you wonder why, like, gastroc and you got all these soleus issues, like antib is always tight. Like you wonder, because the body is constantly searching, okay, where's the feedback? And so now it's just relying on perturbations up the lower leg complex, which is not made for.
Facts.
And that's where it's like, man, just get out of the shoes for a bit.
Yeah.
Now they're cool as shit though. I remember I had a huge collection.
Yeah, shoes are getting cooler by the year.
Yeah.
Now they're laceless. It's like there's an app that you plug into.
But the question is, like, has there been a bad shoe year? Like, I don't think so. I think it just continuously gets better.
Yeah, it gets better. They get doper and they get thicker.
Yeah.
Like eventually we're just going to be on like high heels. Like,
I think we're just going to be rocking Timbos.
Yeah.
Just a lot better version of it.
Man, yeah, it's getting pretty crazy. So speaking of shoes and footwear, bracing. So you get, obviously what we're talking about is, we don't want to make the ankle, we don't want to stabilize the ankle with external bracing because we're going to have problems up the chain. But like you get those kids who are like, dude, if I don't wear braces, I turn my ankle. So what do you do? What do you advise in that scenario?
So what I advise in that scenario is like, all right, when you go play pickup, do you wear braces? Yeah. Okay. When you go just shoot baskets in your backyard, do you wear braces? Probably not. Right?
Yeah, right.
So you find an environment where they actually feel a lot more comfortable and confident, and then you build it from there. It's like, hey man, like, instead of just doing jump shots, like, all right, let's do some individuals. And the next thing you know, they're coming to the paint, making a stop, pivoting, all these things. Like, hey man, guess what? You didn't break. What a concept.
Yeah.
Like, you could build this. And you know what? Your knees don't hurt today? Huh. What a concept, because now the most mobile joint of the body can actually do its job.
Yep.
Once you strap that thing up, and that's where just education, and once again, sweet little analogies. The more analogies you get, or something that's relatable to the athlete, every athlete experiences pain in some form or fashion. I don't think they like it, right? So you can always go back to, hey, remember that left knee pain you had? Your internal and external rotation of your tibia is trash. The reason why it's trash is because you're wearing these space boots. And so now, like, once again, the perturbations that go up the chain, constantly searching for these sensory so that I can say, oh, cut left, cut right, or stop here, stop there. And then all you do is just get a big clunk. And that's where all of a sudden you just palpate on the outside of that antib, and you just flames up real quick. You wonder why. So that's where just simple things like that, I think, can take kids a long way.
For sure. Now, as far as barefoot training, you got to walk a fine line, because, like I always tell people, we are so jacked up from wearing these shoes our entire lives. So people get excited and they go, oh, so there's benefits from barefoot training. I'm going all in. I want to go do plyometrics on the asphalt. and they just trash their feet. I mean, you see plantar fasciitis. You see all kinds of stuff coming from jumping in to barefoot training too fast. So like for us in our online program, first we start with just barefoot warm-ups, and then we kind of just get into some isolated stuff and just wake those muscles up, just get them activated. And then it's just like 5 extra minutes a day that we'll be out of the shoes. And we do some low-level hops, we'll do some low-level skips and that kind of stuff. But we're not going into anything intense right away. How do you do that in the team setting? Is it like barefoot warm-ups, or in that A series, is it barefoot? How do you go about that?
So I go as barefooted as possible, as much as possible, because once again, if we're in microdosing, that's not a lot of time.
Oh, right.
But I do it because I don't do plyometrics anymore. And I know people are like, oh my God, I don't do like high level plyometrics, is what I mean, because they play basketball so much. Like, I don't need to be touching high level plyometrics with these guys. Maybe from a teaching perspective, but not enough load to, put them at like a stress response. Right. So what I'm really doing is I'm more of a generalist, more so now than ever, because of the limited time that I have. So let's barefooted goblet squat. So that's, to me, like, that would be the safest route, is doing it in weightlifting. Because it's under slow speech. You're never leaving the ground.
True.
And you're getting load. Great. Then you move on to something as simple as like, okay, now we're in the wrestling room. We're going through our fascia 2 series, which is just basically like stretching fascial lines. So it's like yoga-esque. I don't want to give it that name, but like we're flowing in and out of different movement patterns, and being barefooted for that is amazing, because now you're truly like you're barefooted in those positions where you're getting the foot very, very malleable. So now I'm hitting it from a quote unquote range of motion standpoint. I'm hitting it from a load standpoint. Now the only thing I'm missing is the plyometric, and that's with just jump rope. Something as simple and novel as jump roping. Low-level plyometrics.
Some low-level, a little longer duration is very, very good for changing structure.
Heck yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's where it's like they get enough on the court, Now, if you're teaching and learning how to get a max effort jump, that takes some true art to get to that. Like, that takes true coaching, to get to that point where you can increase someone's vertical from a technical proficiency standpoint, because a lot of these guys still don't know how to jump. I don't care if they jump the sport.
No, not
at all. They don't know how to jump. And so that's where you could save someone, because now it's not necessarily about getting that jump. It's all about efficiency and effectiveness. But in my world, especially, with 4 hours in the off season, certain weeks, I'm just going to go with the thing that I know is going to keep him pretty robust, and like, let's get submax strong. I don't even say strong anymore. It's submax strong.
Right. Yeah. I mean, like for you, if you're limited in time, let's get them what they're not getting on the court. They're not getting resistance on the court. They are getting some plyometrics, and they are sprinting. And so why feed them that same stimulus?
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. As far as recovery, we're talking about, we're getting these microdose sessions, which that takes care of recovery in itself. Because you're actually training the right way, right? Like, you can't do anything for recovery from a terrible program that's too high volume. Like, you already lost. So I guess the answer to this question already, I'm assuming, is kind of just how you set up your microdose stuff. But Are you doing anything additional on the recovery side? So like after their practices or anything like that?
So you hit the head right on the nail, or did I say that right? You get what I'm saying? But
Something like that.
Something like that. But the best form of recovery is proper planning. And that's where people mess up hugely, is they're like, oh, let's go do these invasive things like ice baths and all this. And it's like, hey, bro, like if you actually prescribe the right dosage of all stress, then they would be all right. They wouldn't need that quote unquote recovery. Now, what I will say is practices and games, I mean, you can't really predict that stuff. You know what I mean? Things happen, and of course you're going to acutely spike loads. So then you're under the situations where, okay, we do need to feel good tomorrow because we got a game, right? So in the off season, no modalities. I don't want anybody quote unquote recovering. Not at all. I want them to develop that type of stress and resiliency in the off season. In season, absolutely. We go modality crazy, right?
So give a little context on that.
Yes.
Because I think a lot of people are like, wait, what in the heck does he mean?
Right.
I know what you mean, but go into detail on that.
For sure. So if you look at recovery, it's a means of stress to a certain degree that will help you recover from stress. So like obviously ice bath, that's, you know, essentially like some people go, oh yeah, it's like, it makes me feel good. Well, initially it's no, it doesn't. Like initially you get in, that's stress, right? It's an environmental stress. But what it does from a biochemical level, like, okay, that makes a little bit more sense. Not saying there's a lot of research that backs it, but once again, placebo is real.
Yeah.
You know?
That was my exact quote from last episode. Placebo is real.
Placebo is real.
Wow. Wow.
Maybe I listened. I don't know.
Man.
But placebo is 100% real.
Absolutely.
But in the off season, look, we're not competing. And so what I'm really trying to do is, even from a biochemical level, I'm trying to create resiliency and durability. So just because they got bigger, faster, stronger in a lot of ways, I don't want them going to those recovery modalities, because that needs to be programmed in just like stress is, just like weightlifting is. So if I'm trying to get the most maximum effectiveness of that recovery modality, it can't be present year round. So just like medicine, right? If I'm going to use a recovery modality, infrared sauna, red light therapy, massage therapy, anything like that, well, if you go a long time without it and then you just add it, man, it's effective.
Yes.
But if you get it all the time, it's like, yeah, that had about 5% increase and whatever.
Right.
So that's where you got to remove it for a while.
Yes.
So that when you do get it, it's maximum effectiveness. And that's
Yeah.
what you're trying to achieve with the recovery modalities.
I
So
love that.
once again, when you have that acute, oh man, there's a lot of stress in a short amount of period of time, let's go get that maximum effectiveness.
Yes. Yeah, I think, and then you look at it from like a muscle hypertrophy standpoint, like in the off season, if we're trying to build some hypertrophy or build some strength, the methods that we typically use for recovery might be going in the exact opposite direction, right?
Yep.
Like for hypertrophy, we need a certain amount of inflammation. We don't want too much, but we don't want too little. That is an absolutely essential part of the training process, of getting that inflammation. And then we hop in the ice bath and it decreases that.
Yep.
Or we take anti-inflammatory drugs and it decreases that. I mean, that is going in the opposite direction. So yeah, we're technically feeling better and our inflammation is going down, but we're not actually gaining anything. We're
Facts.
blunting that whole response.
And that's what you see it so much, especially in season. Like immediately when kids are like, hey, I got a little patellar tendonitis, Advil Tylenol, go.
Yeah.
It's like, oh,
No.
Jesus, their microbiome shot. Congratulations. Now they're not going to be able to absorb nutrients, right? And that's it can go down these dynamic systems like you wouldn't believe, like probably way too much for most podcasts, because it's, from that perspective, it's like, what is helping kids? You think that you just give them that short amount of whatever antibiotic or whatever you're giving them is going to help them, but in reality, I mean, you just shut down their gut microbiome. Now they don't know what to digest, what not to digest, and you wonder all of a sudden they can't hold food down. And because you did it for 6 months of them handling their patellar tendonitis.
Yeah.
Like, maybe it's something else that we can do that's not as invasive. Like people think Tylenol and Advil and whatever is not invasive. Yo, that's invasive. It is.
Yeah.
I mean, especially when it gets into your gut, that it is very invasive.
Right.
But that's where, once again, it's just proper planning.
And what are we actually taking it for? Because if it's patellar tendonitis, is it really tendonitis or is it a tendinopathy? Like, it's probably something that you don't need. It's probably not inflammation.
Right.
Why is it inflamed?
Right.
There's probably a deeper issue and no pill is going to cure that.
Not at all.
right?
Man.
Or if we're taking anti-inflammatory drugs for muscle soreness, again, like I'm talking about, we're going against like
just blunting it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It makes no sense. And so we're not saying that there's no time for like recovery. Like I would never take anti-inflammatory drugs for personally, at least for muscle soreness, patellar tendonitis, whatever. But like, we're not saying, hey, cryotherapy is bad or ice baths are bad. It's just, there's a place and there's a time. Like if I'm on a back-to-back, I'm an NBA player, I'm on a back-to-back, hey, that's a time to try to recover faster.
Maximum effectiveness, right? Because those are opportunities, right? But if you use it all the time, it's just the same thing. It's dampening that effect.
Yeah. It's like I saw people talking about the other day, maybe a study came out, but it was basically how to utilize caffeine for performance.
Yes.
If you take it every day, that is no longer a performance enhancer.
That's why I'm on a cup of coffee at 6 o'clock at night, because I drink so much.
Yeah, like we just needed to stay alive at this point. It's just keeping our eyes open. But yeah, I mean, if you actually used it the right way and you said, you know, today I have my max effort squat. Well, I need a little extra.
Right.
Well, maybe I haven't taken caffeine for the last 2 days, and then pre-workout I hit some caffeine, and now I actually notice those effects.
Right. And that's so funny that we're bringing up this whole like acute issue or inflammation in general, like to create a response. When we go into our off season, we do the exact opposite. So we have quote unquote microdosing. And then we get in the off season, we have mega dosing. Literally, we're lifting for 2 hours.
Wow.
And we do it 3 times a week. Why do we do it 3 times a week? Because they need the time in between, because I'm creating such a stress and such acute amount of time on their body that they need that time in between to recover.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you see lean body mass, you see body composition changes, and they're technically not seeing me as often, so I don't get annoyed with them, which is great. And so that's where we flip the script.
Yeah.
We flip the script and we go into quote unquote mega dosing. And now I'm trying to give you that inflammation.
Yeah.
Because you need it.
Yeah.
And that's where we develop this huge reservoir of handling acute stress. I mean, a game is 2 hours, right? I'm not saying necessarily that's why we do it, but if you're going under time, under tension with isolated movements and the compound movements, and then we finish off with some other isolated movements to make you feel good about yourself for 2 hours, yeah, you best believe you're going to get some breakdown, you're going to get some inflammation. You're going to need that time in between to recover. So that, guess what? Wednesday, we're doing it again. Guess what? Friday, probably going to do it even harder, because you're going to have Saturday and Sunday off.
Yep.
So now let's mega dose this thing.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. I think people are so stuck in there's like one right answer of like, I train this many days per week and I'm on this split. And it's like, dude, there's like 277 right answers. Like,
Right, for sure.
Like, who's to say, you know, you could absolutely do 3 days a week. Like you're saying, mega dosing, you could split that up, microdose, 20, 30-minute sessions. You know, it depends on the time of year, and they all serve its place. In our program, we'll typically do 3 days, and then eventually we'll kick it up to 4, because we're overloading everything. We're overloading our volume, and then we get into overloading intensity. Maybe, you know, there's a lot of different variables that we can mess with, and then you get to a certain point where you're like 6 months in, it's like, okay, what do we change now? Well, let's change the frequency.
Yes.
So now we're overloading the frequency. So we go to 4 days a week, and the questions I get, they're just like, dude, there's no way. Like, how am I going to train 4 days a week? Like my college professor said I need 48 hours of rest. It's like, no, but if we go to 4 days, that just means we're going to cut back on the total amount of sets.
Absolutely.
And so we're getting into a little bit more minimum effective dose.
Well, when you look at it from our microdosing perspective, like we're in January, February, March, like we're setting PRs. And the reason why we're setting PRs is because it's always present. And I think that's one thing that people miss is when training is always present, you can go get those weights. When training is inconsistent and it's not present, when you go get those weights, you're going to have those negative responses that, especially in season, that you don't want. Like you don't want that quote unquote DOMS, right? But the point I'm trying to get at is, if you're really trying to get strong, you got to put yourself in an environment to get strong. And when we go into our microdosing, and we're once again January, February, March, instead of doing 4 sets of whatever, 4 sets of doubles, it turns into 10 sets of doubles. Why? Because now I've created the environment for them to actually go get those weights.
Yeah.
You put a cap on it when you put 4 sets, because now you only got 4 working sets to go get something.
Right.
When you put 10, they can creep. And the next thing you know, that turns into 6 to 7 working sets. And now, once again, because it was always present, you're not going to have that huge acute stress that now all of a sudden they have these negative responses. So now we can go squat, deadlift, clean, back to back to back, and no one feels anything different.
Yeah.
And you think those are 3 big stressful lifts. Not if you do one a day.
Yeah.
But if you did all 3 of those in one lift, you best believe it, right? That's a mega dose.
Yeah.
Right. But that's the beauty of it.
I love that. Okay. So let's talk about, I know a lot of our athletes, something that I don't talk about a lot is getting jacked.
Oh yeah.
And you're jacked. You're the guy to talk to about this. You're the jacked guy with the beard and you got the black coffee and you pulled up in the Jeep. Like, you are the guy to talk to about getting jacked.
I do love that.
Yeah. So, okay, if you're a 16-year-old kid and you're just going to LA Fitness in 45 minutes, like, what are some simple things that you would advise doing? Like, is there a few different exercises that you think these have to be in your program?
I mean, if you're that young, I think just doing like really good calisthenics will get you. I mean, you'll at least look good. You know what I'm saying? If that's what you're going
dips.
For, heck yeah, like go to the prison workouts, pull-ups, dips, chins, and all the variations of them. But if I was like trying to hijack that, I would go a bunch of isolated work and then finish with compound movements. So for instance, I would do like isolated bicep curls, isolated tricep extensions, and then at the end do a junk load of pull-ups, push-ups, dips, because now it's like, if you go with like some John Meadows work back in the day, once again I keep referencing, but pre-exhaustion technique.
Yeah.
Right? You're hitting those isolated groups in like single joint movements, and then you move it on the compound joint where all of a sudden other things can assist. Then you're just doing even more damage, right? In a good way.
Yeah.
So I if I was like on the fast track of trying to get jacked, that's probably what I would do.
Pre-exhaustion stuff. So that would be like, you know, if I'm going to go do a dumbbell bench press, I would hit like a fly. Yeah,
you can. If you're directing like pec work, I would say like type of fly movements. What else could you do? You know what I really like? I really like those, like when you take those two.
Dude, I was just going to say that. Yes. Like, that's I always did that. When I was trying to get jacked, I would take like the 2 10-pound plates and I would squeeze. I would either do iso holds or I'd do like little raises.
Man, I'm telling you, like there's something.
That's so weird because I was just going to say that.
Yes.
And I've never seen anybody else do that. That's interesting.
We vibing, man.
Man, that's crazy. That's crazy. So, okay. So you do that, you pre-exhaust, and then you'd go into your compound.
And then I'd go into the compound and treat it pretty heavy, but you got to have some decent volume. So I need to say anywhere between, 10 to 15 reps. But I always leave one or two in the tank. Like, people always train to failure. Don't get me wrong. Like, technical failure is okay if you're doing calisthenics. But if you're doing free weight exercises, I never train to failure. I at least leave 1 or 2 in the tank.
Yes.
Because if you're failing on dumbbell bench, whose fault is that really? You know, so just rest it up or drop set it. Another great way of adding volume. Yeah. Drop set, mechanical drop sets, or load drop sets.
What's the difference?
So a mechanical drop set, for instance, say I start off on like a high incline dumbbell bench. So now that's obviously a hard angle to press at. So I say I'm using 50s and I hit 6. Okay, well now I'm just going to drop the bench down a little bit more. Now I'm at a more favorable angle. Okay. And then I still got those 50s in my hand. Bang, bang, bang. And then I go all the way down to flat dumbbell bench where you're the strongest.
Dude, that sounds painful.
That's a good one, man. That's a good one.
And then what's the other one that you mentioned?
And then drop set? Just straight up load. So we can stay at a certain angle, like incline dumbbell, say 50s, 40s, 30s, keep going until technical failure on each one of those.
Yeah. It's kind of like the, everybody in high school, I think, did like the dumbbell ladders.
Yes.
Like you run the rack and
I still do them, man. I did them before I came.
That's still in the regimen. Hey, it's metabolic damage.
It's
man.
It's what you're chasing, right?
Yeah. It's not a bad. Or like on the tricep extension, like you go, what is it? You go down a plate or you go up.
The cable stacks?
Yeah, cable stacks. And then you go all the way back down and your triceps are just fried after one set.
No, here's the one. The 21 blasters where you do 7 curls in the partial bottom, 7 at the top, and then 7 full. That's the real one.
Yeah.
That's the OG one.
Yeah. I never understood why. Like, is there a reason for that?
I don't know where 21 blasters come from, but as far as like the reason why it works, it's beautiful. Like, I actually take that concept and take it over to more compound lifts because, for instance, if you're at a back squat, a full range of motion back squat, 315 is probably going to be pretty tough.
Yeah.
but man, I can knock out 10 quarters.
Yeah.
Pretty easy.
So that bottom half was limiting.
So it's that mechanical load that we're talking, or that mechanical, like we use with the incline dumbbell bench all the way to flat bench. Same thing. It's just, you just take the ranges. So now it's more of a range drop set. So that's what I like about some of those partials. And the thing is, like, when we go back to performance, who are the best sprinters in the world, right? These dudes do like what was it? Michael Johnson did like 600 pounds with partials, like one of the fastest sprinters in the world.
Yeah.
I mean, did unbelievable. But man, that's actually the joint angles that they create the most force from. Why wouldn't you tap into that?
Yeah.
So like when we're in our microdosing January, February, March, oh yeah, I like max effort quarter squats because it's not that kind of load on them from a physiological standpoint or a structural standpoint when they're going full range. But you take them through a partial range, next thing you know, you got 4 plates on each side, and then you're moving out with a tendo at like 0.6 meters per second. That is just force. I don't care what vessel it comes in. That is force. That's going to give me the stress that I need for the response to elicit the adaptation.
Yep.
And that's where all of a sudden you start seeing those force plate numbers change, and you're like, I hijacked it.
For sure.
But
For sure.
I wouldn't say do that year round, but yeah.
Yeah. And there's a lot of studies on the benefits of partial range of motion versus full range of motion for vertical jump, I think for sprinting as well. But sometimes they'll show that the full range of motion was better, and that's probably because it's better for hypertrophy. So if that's your limiting factor, then yeah, full range of motion.
I think full range of motion, like in those studies, it's only beneficial to novices.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But when you take elite level athletes, all of a sudden those partials, that's the key.
Facts.
Like that's the one that gets you going.
Right. For sure. That's big time. Okay. Last couple questions. I know we've been going for a while now. So he's on what are you calling it? The strength pedition?
Oh, the strength pedition. Schlesier's strength pedition.
What is the strength pedition?
So essentially what I did was in my Jeep or on my Jeep, I had this like huge exoskeleton cage looking thing. It's like basically like a roll bar around it, but I put this hard rooftop tent. And so essentially like it looks like a big case that takes up the whole roof, and you just pop it open and it turns into like this cube penthouse is what I like to call it, the penthouse. So, but it's surrounded, it's basically like tent material that goes all the way around it, but it's like a hard top, just like a roof.
Yeah.
And so I have this ladder that actually connects to it, and I climb all the way up in it. So it's like off the floor camping. Yeah. So it's really glamping. That's really what it is. But as soon as you enter in this joint, I mean, it's a Tempur-Pedic mattress. There's like solar panels on top for the condensation fan.
That's so
There's
sick.
lights all in the inside. So you get up there and you're like, this is not camping like at all. But it has like I can zip this thing down where it has the mesh still up, but it's 360-degree view. Wow. So if you get to some cool spots, and of course Southern California has the best spots. I mean, you pull up on any beach and that's going to be a great scenery. Yeah. And then just camp it out. But essentially,
that's so sick.
I have 2 weeks of vacation. I was like, what am I going to do with myself? And
yeah.
I was like, you know what? I'm going to go visit all my friends, all my strength professionals, like just random people too. Through Instagram, anything's possible, right? Right. And then I've been training at some of the most iconic spots in Southern California, getting great food and just sick. Learning, So
there's so many like future strength coaches that watch this podcast or young strength coaches. If you're sitting here listening to this podcast and you're like, oh my gosh, he knows a lot, he's really good. That's why. Oh, you do stuff like strength peditions where you just pull up on people, you train with them, you learn from them, and then you go to the next spot. Yeah. And all these other strength coaches are just like sitting there like reading studies, and they're like, I wonder why I'm not blowing up in my profession. Right. You got to get out. This is how you really learn, and that's how you evolve. Is you get out, you shake hands, you meet people. And you really learn. That's how you learn the best. Do you have any advice other than that real life experience? Do you have any advice for like the future strength coaches or the young strength coaches getting in who want to blow up like you?
Man, if you're a young strength coach, you got to figure out things really quick, because I think, and this is a theory, but I think our profession is peaking. I think it's like the stock market. There's like right now we are blowing up. Like strength is awesome right now. Yeah. But there's going to come a time where strength's not going to be awesome.
You think?
I think so. Like I got some theories on it. I don't know.
Why do you think strength's not going to be awesome?
So what's going to happen is one or two things. The medical model is going to take over the athletic model. Yeah. And now doctors are going to be the ones saying, okay, well, he's a physical therapist, so he knows enough about the human body. Oh, you got your CSCS? Man, you're the strength coach now, right? Because of all the football-related deaths and things like that, now the athletic department does not want that kind of burden. So now they put it on the medical, like whatever their medical provider the system is. Like, for instance, Stanford would be Stanford Medicine over Stanford Athletics. Now they wash my hands of that. Right?
Yeah, that would be a very bad idea because...
Oh, absolutely. But it's already happening.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure it is.
You see it in the NBA.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, for sure.
NBA, but man, I mean, I saw the first one pop up in college at a blue blood program, and I was like, uh-oh, like this could get bad. And then there's the other way, which is the Paul Fabrice way, where you have a development or a skill development coach who just so happens to learn a lot about the human body.
Right.
Brilliant approach, by the way. Because when you see these sport coaches who do skill development and they're like, all I need to know is a little bit about GPP, man, to be honest with you, they're probably going to be better strength coaches than anybody else on the planet.
True.
So that's where I'm like, oh, there's a problem. Like, we might not exist in the future. I think like 10 to 15 years from now, we might not have a place like we do right now.
Yeah, I agree. Like, there's so many benefits of being able to know that skill side. Kind of doing what I'm doing, where I truly study on both sides. But I will say, I don't think it's sustainable. Because it's really hard to study at that level on both sides.
Agreed.
It's really, really tough to do that. And you want to know my secret?
Yes.
Okay, so my secret, people always ask me, how do you study strength at that level and study skill at that level? The key is be as dumb as possible in every other area.
I love it.
And everybody can attest to this. Right. I go out of my way to be as dumb as possible. I don't want to know anything. Right. Tell me a fact about the trees. I don't want to hear it. Right. I need brain space because I'm focusing on these two things.
That's so dope.
So I don't think there's that many people who are willing to truly. But I think that there is going to be a lot of basketball players. There's going to be a lot of college basketball players who understand through just playing, and then they get into strength and conditioning, and they have a kind of like you.
That's
you played, right? Yeah. And so you obviously have a little bit of an advantage understanding the game. I think eventually it'll get to that point where, like, if you're a football strength coach, you understand football. If you're a basketball, you played basketball.
And that's been the evolution, right? So football was like really the first team sport aspect of strength and conditioning coaches. And then, I mean, it's still prevalent today, but it's getting less and less more, is where you see football strength coaches are running the basketball programs, and you're like, really? Like, they just know how to get strong.
Yeah. And
then the cultural aspects of that, I mean, there's layers to this. Like, we can get deep. But then now, I think I was like one of 5 that actually played college basketball. That was college strength coach for Division I basketball.
That's like, so crazy.
There's not a lot of us out there. It's going to get more hyper specialized like that. But I still think, man, and this is why, there's the one and done rule is going to be done very soon. When the one and done rule is done, then the coaches are going to ask for more control. When they ask for more control, then the NCAA is going to get more lax on their rules. So, for instance, if I'm a strength coach in college basketball, I cannot touch a basketball. Period. I cannot give a chest pass to anybody.
I could never.
But could you imagine? But
I need to touch a basketball at all times.
But eventually, they're going to say, you know what? Like, the strength coach, you can get a little bit more involved in practice. And when that happens, why would you hire a strength coach when you can hire another coach on the bench? Yeah. So that's where I'm coming with this. It's like, hey, I'm seeing this happening, like, way in the future. Now, if I'm wrong, fantastic. I got job security. Awesome. But if that does, now luckily I hoop, so at least I might have something.
Yeah.
But I'm telling you, like, a lot of you out there, like,
that's interesting.
Get on the sports side, get on the medical side. That's my advice.
Right. Well, and I think on the independent side, I think that's always going to be there.
Oh, for sure.
And I think we're just starting.
Now, private sector, y'all are going, and here's why too, because G League's about to get a dump load of money. Like, it's turning into the like academies, like sport academies, like you see in soccer. If they start doing that for the NBA, oh baby, like, we're going to have developmental, camps and all this, and you're going to need strength coaches,
right?
100%. But as far as like the college strength coach and like how strength coaches are, like, we killing the game right now. We're doing all right, man. We're seeing some crazy salaries. Yeah. But I think it's going to shift. And it's just going to go to a different realm. Yeah, it's not like poof, we're gone.
Well, every industry shifts, and people go, it's going to die, and it just evolves.
Yes,
it doesn't really die; it evolves. But on the independent side, man, we're on the glow up right now.
Facts.
The thing is, like, when I first got into this, I didn't know anybody who made a full-time living on basketball strength and conditioning. Maybe 2 guys.
I think you're the first person I've ever met.
Yeah. There's like a few guys that were maybe doing it, but not many people were doing it. And now I see people coming under me, the guys that I've mentored who are actually making a really good living just off basketball strength and conditioning. And our access to athletes across the world now, right, better than ever. You make one Instagram post and everybody in China sees it. And so it's like with that, if you're somewhat smart and you know how to market yourself and you're dedicated to your craft, you're gonna be able to blow up.
So that's where I'm screwing up. I'm still trying to figure out that whole marketing part.
No, your Instagram's good.
I mean, it's cool. It's cool. But like,
you got a good Instagram.
I'm waiting for that. Like, here's the vessel. You know what I mean? Like, I'm still waiting on that vessel.
You need a Calvin.
Okay.
Calvin gets it done. You need someone like Calvin who's you do the main content and then you forget about it, and then he makes it into pretty little pieces that people Calvin, like to digest.
You just got hired, bro.
Man, I love it. Any other crucial pieces of advice for a young strength coach?
Get under a bar, man. Like, and I don't mean like back squat or anything like that. Like, I don't care what if you're a kettlebell guy, be a kettlebell guy. I don't care. But like, just get awesome at something and compete at something. Like, if you're trying to be a quote unquote strength coach and you've never competed in weightlifting, bodybuilding, something like that, no. Like, you can't just be the performance guy but not do anything for performance.
Facts. Right?
So that's where, like, I wanted to know more about the understandings of nutrition. You know how to understand nutrition is when you do calculated starvation to get a specific response. And then you got to find a way to train under those type of constraints. And if you found a way to train under that, man, you know what 10 grams of fat does to your body.
Yeah, that's huge.
That is nutrition.
I love that.
Not, met this RD and we talked about that. No, I know what performance feels like with 10 grams of fat in my system before I go train when I'm at like sub 4% body fat. Like, that's when you can truly appreciate what's going on inside the body.
Right.
And that's where, like, heck, man, that's where if you're not training or like tinkering, like, that's what, man, I think that's what I'm known for the most is like, I'm constantly tinkering.
Same here.
Making all these regressions to complicated lifts due to the anthros of the athletes that we're training. I mean, that's where the gold is, because it ain't that you're reinventing the wheel. You're complementing the athlete that you're training with traditional means, but through a different vessel. And, at the end of the day, a trap bar squat and a back squat or a trap bar clean pull or a trap bar clean or an actual clean, the body doesn't know what it's doing. It just feels the responses and stresses that you're placing upon it. So once again, if you can hijack that more and more and get quicker results, I mean, that's where you get sought out.
Right. Yeah, it all comes down to doing it yourself and tinkering with it. Like, you can't just study it on YouTube and then expect to implement it. You're going to hurt somebody that way. Like, you've got to do it on yourself, and you start to kind of work out the kinks in it. That's always my number one thing when we hire interns. I kind of just watch them. I'm like, are you training? Like, after you're done? Because when I was an intern, bro, oh my gosh, you got to kick me out of the gym.
Oh, for sure.
Because I'm like, wait. Nice equipment. I'm going to try everything. I'm going to try every variation.
Kid in the candy store.
Yeah.
Right? If you're not that kid,
if you're not that kid, you don't have the passion. You have the passion to make it through a couple years, but then it's going to be a 5:30 wake up call, and you got to go in for another full day, and you're not going to be able to do it. You got to be super passionate about this stuff to make it long term, I think.
I feel like if you don't take an unbelievable risk at some point, it ain't going to happen. Like, some of the dudes that I know, including myself, we were homeless at one point to make it to where we're at. A lot of people ain't willing to go there. Man, I got to make the money.
No.
Man, if you're good at what you do, money's going to come.
Yes.
Money's going to come. And I know you in the private sector, bro, you took a jump.
Yeah.
That's still a jump I am too scared to take right now because I'm like, oh, private sector sounds amazing. Sky's the limit.
Yeah.
Man, this security blanket of the NCAA is kind of nice.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't have to go get my athletes. They're provided for me.
Right.
All right.
Yep. Sky's the limit, but there's also a floor. When you hit that floor, that's not a good floor.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah. Awesome, man. Well, I'm going to let you get back to your strength petition. I know you got a good night of camping. You're going to go down to the beach?
I think, yeah. I mean, the Huntington's super easy, right?
Yeah. Huntington, Newport, either one.
Yeah, it's super
Huntington's
easy.
Got more campers,
yeah,
I would say.
Yeah.
More people on their strength petitions over there.
I think in this area, like, you got a less chance of getting stabbed. Like, if I go in, like, to LA, I'm like, not too confident here.
No.
Skid Row, let's roll up. No,
Man, I love it. That's some serious nuggets. I hope people watch this episode, take notes, rewind it back, get everything you can out of it, because Corey is such an experienced strength coach and such a brilliant strength coach. It's truly an honor to have him on here. Thanks for being here.
Hey, honor to be here, brother.
For sure.
Yep.
All right, guys, thanks for tuning in to episode 7. I know you guys gained a lot of knowledge in this episode. Be sure to keep up with Corey's social media at Schles Strength. We'll put it up right here. He's got a great Instagram where he teaches a lot of different stuff. Be sure to check him out if you want to learn more from him. And if you guys want to get on the Vert Code or any of our online programs, check out www.pjfperformance.net. It is the summertime. That means it's time for gains. Let's get after it.